So what teammates should you use with your Skirk? Skirk is probably one of the pickiest characters that we've seen so far when it comes to choosing teammates. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you guys some of her best teammates, why you should use them, and some of her final just best teams. But if you're trying to get Skirk and some of her premium best teammates, you can get cheaper Genesis crystals with LDShop.gg. LDShop is a cheap, fast, and safe game top-up website that offers top-ups for many games, including Genshin Impact. As you guys can see here, these are the offers they have for Genshin, and all of them are cheaper than the official game store, starting off from 15% cheaper and even more. For example, we can see that 3,280 Genesis crystals offer. It costs $50 in the official game store, but here it only costs $39.10. That's 10.89 or more than 21% saved by using LDShop. They also have many other things like bundles, character outfits, Welkins, and stuff like that. But yeah, when you want to buy, you just click on the offer you'd like to choose. For example, I'm gonna buy the 300 crystals offer. You only need to enter your server region and user ID. Obviously, make sure they're right, and then click on top up. And then you just choose your payment method, and then enter your details, and then just pay. Shortly after that, you'll just receive the crystals in your account. And right now, if you use my link, you'll get a 15% off coupon and also an extra 5% off. That can save you up to $50. They also have more cool things on the website. For example, if you spend more than $80, that can allow you to win a free Welkin. You can go and check it out yourself. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment and top up now. Alright, back to the video. So first of all, I'm going to explain her kit pretty quickly and the key things that are going to affect her team compositions. I'm not going to explain the whole kit. I'm just going to tell you guys the things that are going to maybe prohibit you from using specific teams and push you towards using other teams. So it's mainly going to be her passives. First of all, one of her passives is going to increase level of all the elemental skills of your party members by 1, but all of your party members need to be either Hydra or Cryo, and also there needs to be at least 1 Hydra and 1 Cryo. So it needs to be either 2 Hydras, 1 Cryo, or 2 Cryos, 1 Hydro. If you do that, all of your party members' skill level is going to be increased by 1, including Skirk, and obviously this is going to be pretty good for Skirk because her elemental skill is going to be her main source of damage, so even a 1 level increase is going to be kind of significant. So that passive wants you to be limited to using either 2 Hydros, 1 Cryo, or 2 Cryos, 1 Hydro. The second thing is her second passive. Basically, she can gain some stacks. They're called the Death Crossing stacks. She can gain 3 of them, and each one of your teammates can give her 1 stack if they deal either Hydro or Cryo damage to enemies. That's basically it. And then for each stack, her damage can be increased to 110%, 120, and 170. Obviously, you guys can see it's a big jump, especially for the 3rd stack. And since each one character can only give you 1 stack, that means you need 3 characters that need to deal either Cryo or Hydro damage. And for that, obviously, they need to be either Cryo or Hydro. As you guys can see, the last jump is going to be a 50% jump, which is pretty significant. So yeah, these 2 passives combined are going to give you a big reason to only use Cryos and Hydros on your team. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't, your damage is going to fall off significantly. That's a fact. I mean, also usually the only type of team, since she's a Cryo DPS where you maybe don't want to use a full Cryo Hydra team, is going to be a Melt team. And she doesn't really work with Melt from other reasons. First of all, you're going to lose out on these buffs. There's no pyro applicators that can actually apply consistent good pyro for her to melt consistently, since she's going to be applying a lot of Cryo. So it's also a problem. Even if you can melt your hits, it's only going to be a 1.5 multiplier. It's basically just reverse melt. You're not going to have the Cryo resonance benefits since the enemies are not going to be frozen, so you'll need to build more crit rate. So yeah, melt teams are just not preferred at all because they have so many problems. So now that we know that you'll need to use Cryos or Hydros if they're on the team. Melt teams are bad. That leaves us with very few types of teams where you can use Skirk in. These teams are mainly just going to be freeze teams, which is your optimal type of team. You can use Skirk and then 2 Cryos and then 1 Hydro. I'm going to tell you guys the Cryo option and the Hydro options and rank them and talk about them in another part of the video, which is going to be pretty soon. But right now, I'm just going to give you like Cryo, Hydro, and stuff like that. So yeah, for freeze team, you can use either 2 Cryos, 1 Hydro, which is the optimal thing in my opinion. At least you have the right characters. Or you can use just 2 Hydros and then 1 Cryo. This is preferred if you don't have enough good Hydro characters. This is less optimal, but it's also pretty good. You probably should do that if you don't have enough like good Cryo characters to use and you have like good Hydro characters. As I said, I'm gonna rank them in a bit. So if you have like 2 good Hydro characters and then only 1 good Cryo character, in that case, just go for 2 Hydros instead of throwing like a subpar Cryo. But yeah, altogether, these are just all free teams. This is her optimal type of teams. The second type of team you can use use with her is going to be a full cryo team, it's just mono cryo. In that team, you won't use any hydros. And if you have good cryos, that might be good too, even though it's definitely not recommended because you're going to be losing on the first passive's bonus. But if you don't have a good hydro, for example, and you have good like cryos, and for example, let's say going against enemies that cannot be frozen anyways or something like that, then in that case, you might go for just a full cryo team instead of a freeze team. So yeah, these are the team types. Now moving on to the characters that you can include on these teams. So for a character to be good with Skirk, the requirements for them are going to be those. First of all, they need to be either hydro or cryo, obviously as we talked about. They need to be dealing damage off field to activate her passive while she's on field. Skirk is going to be played on field most of the time, and you probably don't want to mess with her rotation. So if you have a cryo or hydro character, you'd want them to deal damage for you to activate her passive, because her passive is only activated if you deal damage with these characters. They need to deal damage to enemies, which is either hydro damage or cryo damage. If they don't deal damage, if there's just cryo there, they're not going to help at all. So they need to be able to deal damage, and obviously you don't want to steal field time from Skirk. She's pretty much just like a hyper carry, so you'd want them to be able to deal damage off field. And obviously the more damage they deal, also the better, because they're going to contribute to the team's damage. The third thing is they might be buffers. As I said before, Skirk is a hyper carry, so any characters who can give you like damage bonus, crit rate, crit damage, resistance shred, like for cryo or hydro, whatever, all of these things are going to be pretty good on Skirk. Even attack, anything. She's basically just a typical hyper carry DPS, so she can take any buffs she gets. So if your hydro or cryo character can also buff her, that's going to be pretty good. And then finally, the last thing, which is going to be a plus for any character, is them being sustain units. Now, this is not necessary because her skill already gives her like resistance to interruption. But obviously, if they're sustain units, like they can give you a shield or heal you and stuff like that, then that can work too. It's always a plus, and it's good for comfort with any character. Personally, I always play characters with like a shielder, just for me to just not think as much. So yeah, knowing these things, let's move on to character rankings for a Skirk teammate. So first of all, starting off with the Hydro. When I say Hydro in the previous like base teams I gave you, you can fill up the Hydro slot with any of these characters, preferably from top to bottom. So first of all, the top tier for Hydro characters, I would say Fiorina is probably going to be the only one in there. She's definitely going to be the best in slot Hydro character by a long shot. And if you have her, you probably want to include her in Skirk teams, to be honest. She's just going to give you damage bonus. She's going to be giving you like Hydro damage, Hydro application, and she can also give you normal attack speed, which is pretty good. With her, you'd want a healer with the cryo, but yeah, she's definitely a pretty good Hydro character to use with Skirk. If you're using one Hydro character, I definitely recommend just using Fiorina. The second tier, I would say, is probably just gonna be Yellen and Mona. I mean, Yellen is probably a little better. Just off-field Hydro application, all you need, and then significant good damage, which is pretty good. Mona, pretty much the same thing. It can also give you some burst damage bonus, which is pretty good. Xingqiu is probably in that tier too. He can also just do pretty much the same thing as Yellen, just with less damage. He can just do Hydro application, just damage, Hydro resistance shred. He can also heal you a little bit, so yeah, he's definitely gonna be a decent option to use. And then finally, the last tier character, I don't really see any except Candace maybe, just for the interruption resistance maybe. And then obviously she can just apply Hydro, which is pretty decent. But you probably don't want to use her if it comes to that, unless you absolutely have to. So yeah, this is it for the Hydros. As I said before, probably just go for Fiorina if you have her. She's gonna offer much more value to the team than the other characters. If you want to use two Hydros, then obviously just go Fiorina and then probably like Yellen. If you don't have Yellen, just go Mona and then Xingqiu and so on. Now moving on to the cryo characters. The top tier cryo characters to use with Skirk are going to be first of all Escoffier and then Shinha. Escoffier is probably just going to be applying huge amounts of cryo damage and obviously a huge amount of cryo resistance shred, which is going to buff Skirk's damage by a huge amount. She can also heal you, and she can also just give buffs to cryo and Hydro units, which is pretty good. So yeah, just the cryo resistance shred and stuff like that. Honestly, Escoffier is probably one of the best characters to use with Skirk. In my opinion, probably the best, honestly. If there's one teammate you're trying to get for Skirk, then Escoffier is probably going to be that one. So yeah, she's definitely going to be a top tier character. If you're using one cryo, I'll definitely recommend just going for Escoffier. Shinha is going to be right behind, but she's still in the same tier in my opinion. She's the OG cryo buffer. She can give you just like a cryo damage buff, so all of your normal attacks and skill and burst and stuff like that. She can also give you some resistance shred, but yeah. So yeah, Shinha is definitely going to be a top tier cryo character character you'd want to use. The second tier for cryo characters is probably going to be Lally, in my opinion. She's going to give you a big shield, resistance shred, and off-field cryo application, which is pretty good. That's everything Skirk needs. And personally, I really like her for her big shield. She can also sometimes proc the 4-piece Cinder City, which can be a huge damage buffer too for Skirk. So yeah, in my opinion, Lally is probably a very good option that you can use with Skirk too. And then after that, the last tier characters that you'd want to use if you don't have any other characters. You can use somebody like Charlotte, for example, or Layla or Diona. Just mainly all of them can apply some cryo off field. They can also deal some cryo damage to proc the effects, and they can either give you a shield or heal you and give you sustained, abilities. Another tier of characters is non-cryo hydro supports. You can probably use somebody like Kazuha, for example, if you really want to. I definitely wouldn't recommend that because your damage is just gonna fall. But if you really want to use a non-cryo character, maybe you don't have a cryo character built and stuff like that, your options are probably gonna be Kazuha or Jalinin, and maybe Sucrose if you don't have Kazuha and Jalinin. Kazuha can just act as the normal, like, for Destiny resistance shred and stuff like that. Jalinin can give you the buff. Sucrose, basically the same thing as Kazuha and some elemental mastery, so yeah. But that's definitely heavily not recommended. Your damage is just gonna fall, like significantly fall. But if you absolutely have to, I'd say just go for Kazuha or Jalinin. But yeah, now for just final team examples. Obviously, we're going to take out characters from the top tier. So we can just take the top tier characters and form a team. So it's going to be Skirk, Shenhe, Escoffier, Fiorina. This is going to be her best in slot team. She's going to deal like crazy damage. This is probably the best team in the game right now, probably in my opinion. Especially if you have good weapons, maybe some constellations on these characters. This team is going to deal crazy damage. This is the best in slot team for Skirk. So if you can afford it, definitely go for it. And then you can start replacing characters if you don't have to. As I said before, you probably just want to use the highest tier you can. So for example, let's say you don't have like Lally and you don't have like Shenhe, for example, and you use Skirk and then Escoffier and then Fiorina. You probably don't want to use like Layla, for example. You probably just want to use Yellen because that's going to result in more damage. You want to go for the higher tier character, and that's probably going to result in more damage in general. Don't hold me up to it, but in general, this is going to be the case. So whatever cryos or hydros you want to pick, just go for as high of a tier you can. Make sure you include at least one cryo and one hydro. That's basically the baseline of a Skirk team. But yeah, tell me what teams are you guys going to be using in the comments. Pretty sure somebody's just going to use her in a melt team after everything I said here, but either way, just tell me what teams you're going to be using. If you guys leave a like, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Peace.